We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. With us today, as always, is Tom Fuentes, former Assistant Director of the FBI, my co-host. It doesn't seem like there's light at the end of the tunnel, but I don't want you to give up because I believe this country is the most resilient nation in the history of mankind. But to kind of bring you up to speed on some really rather interesting things that have transpired, I go right back to immigration, guys, something I've been talking to you about since I started doing this podcast, which was under another name, Between the Lines. So here's what kind of happened in New York, which everybody should be, I would say, aware of. They had 3 sexual assaults in upstate New York, 2 in Erie County. One was actually a rape. The other was a sexual assault. I could get into the definition of a sexual assault, but it doesn't always lend itself to rape. There are different formats of sexual assault. The other sexual assault took place in Delaware County. Now, I know that Eric Adams thinks the manner in which he's going to manage this problem is to share what he's referring to as a headache. I got it. You're spending $9+ million a day. You can't house them. They're living on your sidewalks. And what's going on at the border? I'll tell you. In the month of June, 145,000 people crossed illegally into your country. In the month of July, 183,000 crossed illegally. That's Customs Border Patrol statistics. These are not statistics we're making up, coming right from the government. We now have a lieutenant at the border, Oliveri, who's reporting that they have drug cartels found in our country carrying assault rifles. You know, the rifle they're trying to ban you from having, carrying assault rifles and wearing body armor. I don't know what the threshold is that we need to cross before some morality attaches itself to this discussion. But I can tell you this, we've got treason. And when Tom gets in, I'm going to specifically ask him about that. Because if there's anybody knows about treason, it's Tom. Not because he's committed it, but I'm sure he's investigated it. On another note, we have this incident in Maui. Now, this is really disturbing. We're going to give these residents $700 a piece. I'm not quite sure what $700 is going to do for you after you've lost everything in your life, starting with your loved ones. But the interesting part of this discussion is commingled in the bill to allocate this funding, which actually hasn't been enacted, are billions of dollars allocated for the Ukraine. We call it pork belly spending. Guys, please open your friggin' eyes, okay? Tom, myself, Christian Briggs, TJ, Brian, all of us invested in this are not doing this because we want to hear ourselves. We're trying to give some sensibility to this living experience every day. We're trying to course correct this country through a conversation. And the only way that will happen is if more and more of you become involved in this conversation with us. I do want to say something else that's highly, highly relevant and important to what we're doing here today. So that we're clear, we're speaking to everyone. Everyone. We don't have a narrow demographic. Well, this isn't a message for Democrats or Republicans. This is a message for everyone. If you're straight, you're gay, you're LGBTQ, you're transgender, you're lesbian, you're black, you're white, you're Catholic, you're Jewish, you're Muslim. I don't care who it is. I don't care about your lifestyle choices or your culture. We're speaking to everyone in this country, like we used to do during the Kennedy administration. We spoke to this country as a whole, as a totality. That's left this conversation. It's all driven by our constituents and lobbyists and money interest groups. It's just shameful what we're living. This is shameful, and we're better than that. I do want to say something to you about the mentality going around here a little bit. So I watched the Laura Ingraham show. I look at all these media outlets, Fox, MSNBC, CNN. So Laura has this MMA fighter on by the name of Colby. And she's going through the motion of learning how to defend herself and all this happy nonsense. And at one point, this is where the conversation goes. They're speculating on who would win in a fist fight between the two presidents, Biden and Trump. Is that really our mentality? That this is some form of entertainment, alluding that our elected officials should get into fistfights. Everything we're teaching our children not to do, we're just spewing out there with reckless abandon. Guys, I don't know what to say to you, although I do know what to say to you. You know, we have to detach from whatever your politics have been in the past, your agenda, whatever that might be. I do know America has a price tag attached to it. Everything we do is driven by money. We value money more than we value the safety of our children. I can prove it to you. Just look at the lack of security on your schools across the country as we've allocated about $115 billion into Ukraine. Once again, I go back and say to you, we're not taking care of our own people. Look at Maui. In any case, I want to bring Tom in because there's some real interest. I do want to say one other thing, guys, before I go. We have an issue going on in Maui, excuse me. We have an issue in California right now with incredible flooding as a result of this rather anomaly, a hurricane off its coast. And the president is in Lake Tahoe vacationing. If this doesn't offend your sense of decency, I don't know what will. And I don't know what Democrat would like to come on and explain to me, insult our intelligence further by telling us this is appropriate behavior. This man spends every weekend almost in Delaware at his beach home, okay? I don't understand. This country is in crisis. Your borders are shot, your major cities. Residents and businesses are fleeing an epic number. Your foreign policy is sketchy, and I'm being polite. Look what you're paying for gas. Look what it's costing you for commodities when you go to a grocery store. Oh, yeah, by the way, it's only a 4% inflation rate. When a commodity goes up 22%, why are you intentionally misleading us with this? It's only 4%. Where do you see 4%? You know, we've gotten into in this country a habit of lying, and it doesn't seem to like stop with the Democrats. It's just the way we do business today. We lie to you about the borders and the immigration issue in the country. We want to make you think, oh, I heard Alejandro Mayorkas said the border is closed. I guess you can explain why 183,000 people crossed it in July. And these numbers I gave you are not counting gotaways. These are people detected by technology and drones, you know, things of that nature, cameras. The lies about gun control. We'd like to make you think we're going to have gun control. I guess unless it applies to an elected official's son who can violate our federal laws, falsely filling out what we call a federal firearms form, number 4473. The lie on that form is a felony with a 10-year prison sentence. But let's push the gun platform. When are these knucklehead groups going to get together and sit down and put in place a mechanism that prevents mentally ill people and emotionally disturbed people from getting their hands on guns? And by the way, guys, I experienced it in Manhattan Beach, California. I spoke about this on numerous occasions. The chief was Ernie Klebershaw. He mandated, before I got a concealed weapons permit in the state of California to conduct my business. And those of you who have researched me know I did a lot of work in the private security field and still do. I had to be psychologically screened for the issuance of the first permit. The permit was good for 2 years, psychologically screened. Permit was good for 2 years, psychologically screened. This went through 5 cycles. He was on to something. The rest of the country was asleep at the wheel. Let me bring in Tom. I want to talk about first, Tom, this whole thing with BRICS. Give me a little update on what's going on with this whole issue.
Well, Lou, the BRICS group are the countries that want to form an alliance to dethrone the United States dollar as the reserve currency of the world. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are the leaders of BRICS. And then you have another 40 to 60 countries that have joined or want to join. Now, one of the interesting issues they want to do is come up with a currency that would replace the dollar. They'll invent some new currency. Now, years ago, when the European Union was formed and they invented the euro, there was talk that the euro is going to replace the dollar. Well, that didn't happen, and a lot of issues now with the European Union and NATO, many of the countries of Europe. But regarding BRICS, they're meeting in South Africa to discuss their strategy of how they're going to replace the dollar. President Xi Jinping of China is going to attend in person, and Putin, president of Russia, is going to attend by video conference because there's an international arrest warrant issued from The Hague for him for war crimes because of the invasion of the Ukraine. But in any event, the interesting thing now is, and I've seen reports in the last couple of weeks, Wall Street Journal and a few other Business Insider, that the Russian economy, the ruble, is about half the value it was even a year ago, and that it's in trouble. And then you have China and their economy, their largest real estate firm just declaring bankruptcy last week. And China and India are basically exchanging harsh words because India doesn't want China to be in charge of the new, whether it's going to be a yuan or what the basis will be for the new currency. So already you have the top three countries of BRICS that are basically having arguments with each other about who's going to control this, what currency is going to be in charge that will be named to replace the US dollar. So I think that's a work in progress on their part. We'll see what happens.
So Tom, just give me your opinion here, because I'm not sure you have a definitive answer, but how do you feel that translates to our country currently? Are we kind of like in a sit and wait mode, lay back and observe? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't call it lay back and observe, but I would say that the US dollar, there's been a lot of criticism of US financial policies, US foreign policy, bullying other countries, et cetera. But for the last 70 years, the United States dollar has been the reserve country of the world, and many key purchases from country to country are done using the dollar. Whether it's by, buying oil or other commodities from each other, it's still the dollar. So the idea that somehow they're going to invent out of the blue a new currency or pick one of the existing, like the yuan or the ruble, to replace the dollar, I think it's a long way from happening. It'll be interesting to see how the discussions end up with the BRICS countries meeting now.
Very good, Tom. Tom, I want to segue you, if you don't mind, into a discussion about the FBI Director Christopher Wray. My own observations of him about 4 months ago, I heard him reference the southern border, as a threat to our national security, which should have been a call to arms in a sense, but it's fell on deaf ears, I guess. Also mentioned that every 12 hours, the FBI was opening up a case regarding China's activity in the country. Most recently, though, I think it was Jim Jordan from Ohio was questioning him, and I watched the hearings about this branding of Catholics in Virginia as some form of terrorist organization. And you and I both know he was appalled. He was just aghast, I think is what he said. And this was an anomaly, and this didn't go on and go on, go on. Tom, what really happened here, my friend?
Well, we don't know completely because the FBI review that's been underway since the memo went out in January is still ongoing. Just a quick chronology here. January 23rd of this year, the memo goes out targeting radical traditional Catholic churches. And it's basically the interest of racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists in radical traditionalist Catholic ideology almost certainly presents new mitigation opportunities. In other words, hey, this is a great chance for the FBI to go into these churches, develop informants, and start investigations. Now, when this becomes public, Wray says, as you mentioned, he testifies in March, on the 23rd of March, tells the Senate Intelligence Committee that when he heard about the report, it left him aghast, and that he had it removed, took steps to immediately remove it from FBI systems.
Hold on, did he say he had gas or he was left aghast?
It might have given him gas when you see his facial expressions during the testimony, but in any event, could have had both, but he's aghast. He uses that same word with Jim Jordan in the House Intelligence Committee later on. Now then Wray says, this is back in March, this was a single product by a single field office. Well, that wasn't true. Congress later finds out that the document also included the Portland and Los Angeles offices of the FBI. So when Wray is asked about that, he basically hems and haws and says, well, the review is ongoing. Jim Jordan asked him specifically in the House hearing on July 12th. Wray testifies to the House Judiciary Committee that the FBI will brief on the results of the internal review by August 22nd, 23. Now, what's interesting here was I was an inspector in the FBI at one point in my career. I was an assistant inspector. I got dispatched to numerous field divisions and headquarters divisions to do this type of review, internal investigation. And when he says that, by the end of summer is what he first said, the review would be completed. So he's basically saying the review was going to take 8 months. Now, in my day, and I realize that's 15 years ago or more when I was still in the FBI, back in the good old days, in my day, a review like this of a division like Richmond and a memo like the one that went out would take 8 days, not 8 months. And it would be career threatening to whoever signed off on this, because it's a clear violation of the First Amendment regarding going after a church in this case, with little or no predication, by the way. So in any event, now this investigation is supposed to take 8 months to come up with a review. And, people have asked, well, what's the possible outcome of these type of reviews? I can tell you, when I was an inspector and went out, or when we inspected field divisions or headquarters divisions, for the boss of the office to sign off on something like this, it's basically career threatening. The boss, special agent in charge, could easily be transferred to headquarters and put in charge of maintaining the lawns at Quantico or something important like that. So these types of issues, when a review is done, it's very significant if it's done diligently, which the way the operations of the FBI appear these days, we don't see a lot of diligence or timeliness in how quickly they resolve issues like this.
We're going to take a quick break, guys. You're listening to Tom Fuentes, co-host of this show, Operation Truth. We encourage you to become involved in the conversation. Email us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Please become part of this conversation. As you can tell, Tom would just give you information you're not ready for, is all I'm going to say. We'll take a quick break, coming right back. Just stay with us, guys.
The world is in crisis, with political unrest and financially unstable countries trying to print their way to prosperity by taking on trillions of dollars of new debt. It's incredibly concerning. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. So call today to receive the free hard asset information kit on how easy it is to own silver. Green energy demands will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and Tom Fuentes, the co-host on this show, who's just a wealth of information. And by the way, before I forget, Chris Schrecker, if you're within the sound of my voice, we want to get you on the show with us, because we know you're another man of high integrity and a wealth of information as well. Tom, I'd like you to pick up where you left off, if you don't mind.
Basically, the investigations of a religious establishment, whether it be a Catholic church or, a temple or a mosque. Now, you may recall 20 years ago when we were having a high degree of terrorist cases in the FBI, Islamic-based terrorism cases. The FBI had investigations penetrating a mosque in Brooklyn, New York, because members of that mosque were conspiring to commit terrorist acts and did so, making bombs, hiding in the mosque from the authorities. And the FBI did penetrate, but they had predication. They had a reason that they knew people in that mosque were preparing to do terrorist activities and preparing explosives to do it. We don't see that kind of predication out of the Catholic Church in Richmond or LA or Portland. The only basis they cite is, they have a couple of masses a week in Latin, the original. Now, the history of that is, go back a couple thousand years for Catholic churches to do mass in Latin. In 1965, there was a Vatican Council, Vatican II, in which they concluded that around the world, in countries everywhere, that they didn't have to do every mass in Latin. If they wanted to do it, if you're in Mexico and they wanted a Spanish mask, or, in France, a mass in French, whatever it might be, the churches were free to decide to do it in their local language as opposed to Latin. Now, Latin wasn't forbidden. It's still allowed. And in many churches, that was still the main way. And if you watch any of the major ceremonies in the Vatican now, when they're naming a new pope, or they're having Christmas Mass or Easter Mass, they still do it in Latin. So there's no prohibition that Latin somehow means they must be terrorists. They must be up to no good. And that's basically what the memo is implying. Now, one thing I wanted to add from the title of the memo, where it says, it certainly presents new mitigation opportunities. That means an opportunity for us to go into these churches and basically develop informants and conduct surveillance, conduct spying operations. That's a mitigation opportunity. So that's actually pig Latin, I think. But in any event, it's despicable that this memo got out, or that field officers were following it, or senior executives, including in Richmond, the principal legal advisor of that division signed off on that. This is absurd. They should have known face value, it's unconstitutional, and not done this.
I'll tell you why I think Mr. Ray has a problem here, Tom, because there are two scenarios, and just an observation. The first observation is, why would the FBI, under any circumstance, undertake an investigation targeting a religious group, the Catholics, Jews, Muslims, whomever? Number one. Number two, here's Mr. Ray's problem. He's either a liar, Tom, or he's uninformed as to what's going on in his own organization. Either way, he's screwed, put it to you politely. I mean, he can't talk his way out of this thing. He either looks like he's incompetent, doesn't know what's going on in the FBI, as he should, or he flat out lied. Now, I know you have your own opinions. I know that you're rather upset
Well, Lou,
with
I can tell you what the procedures were for the director or any senior executive in the FBI that's going to testify in front of a committee. They get extensive briefing material from each division in the FBI that might have an issue with this, whether it's a terrorism case or a criminal case or some other espionage case, whatever it might be. The FBI director would have probably, a folder about this thick, 1 or 2 inches thick, with the material regarding this issue and the background material and everything about it. So for him to answer these questions, oh, gee, I really don't know. I'm going to have to look into this and get back to you and all of that. No, I'm not buying it. Now, if everybody else wants to buy that, fine, but I don't, because I know what goes into a director's briefing book to prepare for one of these episodes on the Hill.
And that's the value in having you on the show, Tom, because we can cut through a lot of the intentional misleading, or as I mentioned earlier, the lies that they keep spewing out here that the public is just supposed to, I guess, take whatever they say on face value. There seems to be a lot of amnesia in Washington, D.C. these days. Tom, I want to continue on this topic if you think there's any closing remarks, but I do want to segue into a conversation about the crime in our major cities and the fact these cities are going to go dark. We're going to lose business. We're going to lose residents. Eventually, there won't be businesses there to loot any longer. So I want you to conclude your observations regarding Mr. Ray, the overall manner in which the FBI is conducting itself today, and just where you think he's going. Where's he going from here, Tom? What's the scenario for this man?
Lou, I don't see him making any serious effort to establish trust in the FBI from the American people. Now, normally, when you have 60% of the population saying they no longer have confidence in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which formerly had tremendous confidence all over the world, and I've traveled all over the world to 90 different countries in connection with FBI and Interpol business during my career and since as a consultant. And I can tell you that to hear that the FBI has that little confidence from the public, and you have senior officials in Senate and Congress, the House, advocating the dismantlement or defunding of the FBI, including presidential candidates right now as the new season starts up. Now, normally, if you're the head of the field division in the FBI, every division undergoes the inspection process. I mentioned being an inspector at one point in my career. That happens every 3 years. That process to the boss and the senior executives of that division is career threatening. And many were removed because the conclusion of the inspector was this office is being operated inefficiently and ineffectively. That person would be transferred out and demoted out of that position. Now, you have an FBI director that for now 5, 6 years or more we've heard this lack of confidence in the Bureau, and it continues, and nothing he does mitigates that. When he testifies and he's evasive, doesn't supply documents in a timely manner to the committees when they ask for or subpoena materials. If he was running a field division, he'd be out. Running the FBI basically over the cliff like he's done in the last 5 years, he should be out just for that, just for ineffectiveness of him running the FBI.
You know what's really interesting, Tom, just to not tangentialize, but when you look at the media coverage on this, there's almost no media coverage from MSNBC and CNN.
That's true, but there's been enough media coverage for the public to lose confidence in the Bureau. Imagine if they actually did report everything. Might be 90% saying the FBI is no good anymore. And this is not the first time this has come up. If I could digress to a history here. Right after 9/11, there was a hue and cry in the country to eliminate the FBI. We need an organization like the British MI5. That's what we need, MI5. Now, that was going on. It was going on through the 9/11 commission hearings and all of that. What happened is chiefs of police across the country said, we don't want a new agency doing national intelligence investigations or national security investigations in our territory. We know the bosses and the agents of the FBI, and we trust them. Secondly, and the final thing that saved the FBI was in July of 2005, there's a major bombing on a bus in London and in the subway underground in London. 56 people were killed. And now suddenly, all this attention was placed on the FBI, on MI5, and it turned out MI5 had that group of terrorists under surveillance for a year. And then when they didn't do anything bad in a year, they just dropped it and went on to other groups, saying, we don't have enough resources to keep doing it. So they dropped their investigation of the group that actually killed the 56 people. Then all of a sudden, all the attention was that, well, maybe MI5 should be abolished, and maybe it saved the FBI at the time.
Yeah, Tom, we're going to take a quick break. I want to come back and further this conversation. I do want to get some of your insight or your observations about this Maui relief and just the MO of the government. Earlier, the producer on the show, TJ Stone, mentioned to me that they're looking to rebuild Lahaina as a green, project, which I don't think anybody has an aversion to, especially if it's better for the environment and translates to being better for our children and their future. We've got a lot of people suffering there, and we're going to come back and talk about that, what the government's doing, not doing what they should be doing. We'll be right back, guys. Just stay with me. This is Operation Truth. I also remind you, please become part of this conversation, Operation Truth Official @gmail.com. We need your comments, your thoughts, your questions, your observations. We'll be right back. Stay with me.
Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. With us again is Tom Fuentes. If you've been listening, he's given you quite a bit of information regarding our current FBI director and some of the deficiencies, which are not politically tied. I want to remind everyone, Tom and I are not Democrats or Republicans. We're Americans. We're fathers. We're citizens of this country that we love, that we don't take for granted. By the way, that's what's happening in America. You're taking this place for granted, guys. And I'm going to tell you, the day you thought would never come is going to arrive unless you get involved in this conversation with us. We're not running for political office here. We're both too smart for that, but we are trying to change the conversation in this country and provide you with some viable information that will allow you to make better decisions, starting with voting. And hopefully it'll translate into other issues like parenting your children. Tom, I want to come to you right now. I know you've been following Maui, and I mentioned a few moments ago about the president up in Lake Tahoe taking a vacation while we have two natural disasters going on, one in Southern California and out to Palm Springs, and one in Maui. What's your feelings, or what are you hearing on this?
Well, also, though, he never went to Palestine, Ohio, after the train wreck spewing toxic gas into the air and poisoning their waterways that went all the way into Pennsylvania. He made no appearance there. Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg shows up a couple of weeks later, acting pretty lame in his response to what they were going to do for the local residents. So that was another forgotten group of victims, let's say the residents of that area, that county. With regard to Hawaii, we find out that Biden wants to give each of the residents $700 apiece, and then tie that into a package that includes more than $20 billion in aid to Ukraine. So the Ukraine package, part of that package, is way more than any money that victims in Hawaii are going to get. It's just, kind of a fake appearance. I don't know what you can say. He's obviously, he shows no real concern. I think the people should see through that. He could care less about those residents and in any of those locations. It's just the way it goes. Too bad.
Tom, you brought up that figure, and what's so interesting is that it's been reported that the amount of money that's going to be allocated to the residents there is about $5.6 billion. But I just sit here and I hate to say this, but sometimes you're starting to wonder, is the institution being run by the inmates? And there's nothing funny about saying that, although it does sound rather humorous. We've got a problem in the country. Tom, without going off on this tangent about term limits, which will never occur because the very same demographic that has to vote them in, put them in play, they're not voting themselves out of jobs. But we have a lot of problems in this country. I want to brush up against this issue with the cities, because you and I have intimate knowledge of cities. We were both local law enforcement agents, which gives you a whole different slant as opposed to what the federal experience is when you're in the streets every day with people, and it gets touchy and feely, and there's more emotion attached to it. There's a lot more. There are a lot of elements. So, where do you see as the future for our cities, Tom, absent of a course correction?
Well, I think at some point there has to be a course correction, because not everybody can move out of these cities. It's one thing if you're running a service business on the internet. Yeah, you can relocate to a suburb or out to a farm or wherever you want. But for a lot of the employees, because I hear people say, well, they shouldn't be riding the subway in New York City to go to work. It's dangerous. Well, for a lot of these people, there's no other way to get to work. They can't afford taxis. They can't afford limos. They've got to ride the subway system. The jobs that they have, if you're working housekeeping in one of the Manhattan hotels, where are you going to go? How many other hotels in the country can accommodate the tens of thousands of workers in these hotels that are part of housekeeping or maintenance or some of the other facilities management type operations of those businesses? Those jobs aren't everywhere. That includes the police. You have states like Florida extending an invitation to law enforcement officers to come down. We'll give you a bonus. We'll take care of you. But if you're on a police department and your pension doesn't transfer and you've got 10, 15 years, there are a lot of departments like the one I was on when I went to join the FBI that they basically said, okay, you've had 6 years on this police department. You've contributed to the statewide pension fund for that department. That's it. When you go to the FBI, we'll write you a check for what you contributed. That's it. You're done. If you were leaving that department to go to another department, same thing. We'll write you the check. You start at ground zero with the new police department. Now, some states don't have that. California, if you're a patrol officer in San Jose and you become a sergeant in San Francisco, and then, you move to Oakland PD as a lieutenant, your pension goes with you and accumulates. You don't start over at zero when you do that. But at a certain point, it's not practical financially or otherwise to be able to make that switch. And I think that for a lot of police officers, where they're working If they've got 1 or 2 or 3 years, something, a low amount of time, well, that's okay. They can go just about anywhere. But if they have a larger, you get to about the 8 or 10 year mark, you're not going to cash that in and you have nothing then. If you go to the other department, it doesn't work out, or you try to move to another state, that's going to cost money. It's going to disrupt your family and your kids in school and everything else. So it's not feasible for everybody to flee every one of these cities that's in such big trouble.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, Tom. The interesting thing about policing, it's going to kind of self-remedy. We're not going to have police because you look at some of our major cities today, like Seattle and Portland. Let me stop right there. Washington, D.C., young councilman calling for the National Guard because the D.C. police can't control the city. The crime rate, I think the homicide
He's the
rate.
same guy that called for defunding the police.
You didn't let me get there, big boy. It's a bit of irony, but they keep talking about defunding the police. I want everybody to understand when they defund the police, that lends itself to either eliminating or cutting back a budget for hiring. You don't have to worry about that. We can't find kids that we can hire. It's just, and I could tell you things that are going on in major police agencies here with individuals who literally cannot speak a word of English that are in law enforcement academies, and they're using other cadets or recruits as interpreters so they can, this is beyond description and words. And you know what? That's no reflection on that particular recruit who cannot speak English, but when you get, assigned to a community, they need to talk to you. They're probably great kids. I'm hoping that they've been properly vetted, which is a whole nother discussion that we talk about, starting with the immigration problem. We're not vetting anybody, but, look, we can talk about this ad infinitum. My view on the major cities is that if we don't have a course correction, and I'm going to say this about the Republicans, get off your rear ends, go into these major cities, collaborate with the clergy and the local elected officials, and convince them to trust the conservative element, because the real tragic part of this discussion is that children aren't getting educated properly, which lends itself to this vicious cycle that leads into unemployment and crime. And the other thing is the collateral damage issue. It's just, I don't even know what to say. But if you look at our major cities, Tom, they continue to vote in that representative body that is killing their kids. This is beyond comprehension. But you know what happened? I hate to say this because the Republicans have to take responsibility. They are very socially insensitive, and you have to stay out of people's personal lives. I don't know why anybody's Republican care who anybody sleeps with. I really don't care. The transgender issue, I was bumping up against that in Studio 54 50 years ago almost. I do agree, stay away from our kids, straight, gay, transgender. Leave our children alone. We're trying to teach them the color of crayons, and you're talking to them about sexuality. That's a separate tangential discussion. But, the bottom line is soften your social positions. We need a migration policy, one that is not tantamount to your ability swimming the Rio Grande, which Texans have already taken care of. They put up a buoy, which I guess is designed to prevent them from paddleboarding, surfing, swimming, or, just navigating that body of water. But you need an intelligent migration process. We need an intelligent approach to how to manage the guns in the country, which are never going away. It's a lie about gun control, folks. The low estimate, legitimately speaking, is 500 million. The ATF, I understand, came out, said could be as many as 1 billion. We had a window of time in America where we didn't have serial numbers on guns. There were no records kept for long arms. Most of the handguns, we don't know where the hell they are anymore. Oh, yeah, by the way, we're arming an entire country's populace so they can repel a foreign invader and tyranny, the Ukraine. But you shouldn't be prepared for that here. Guys, we may come back in a second, although I have a feeling we're going to have to wrap right now. But when we start the next segment, I'm going to get into a conversation with China, with Tom, an activity going on in this country. I think you're going to find it interesting because Tom's got his thumb on the pulse of this. Guys, you've been listening to Operation Truth with myself and Tom Fuentes. We encourage you to please become part of this conversation, communicate with us. We're encouraging you to communicate. We're not looking for you to agree, by the way. We want you to communicate. The thing we're going to do is reintroduce these words that left the conversation: dignity, respect, intelligence, compromise. We want you to communicate. We're not looking for you to agree with us on every topic. We're not trying to spoon feed you. we're giving you food for thought. And if you're not getting food for thought from Tom, I don't know what to say to you. We'll be back for the next episode next week. Thank you for joining us. Tom, thank you again for supporting this effort. And this has been Operation Truth.
Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss an episode of Operation Truth. Send us an email, ask your questions, and very possibly we'll address your question on the air.